At first, no one believed she would survive. In fact, at first, no one believed she was real. That morning, the mist had not yet lifted from the old oak trees of Ash Grove Forest. The sun's first rays slipped through the dusty glass windows of the small veterinary station, light falling onto the tiled floor like a whisper. In the quiet room, filled only with the soft hiss of the respirator and the familiar scent of antiseptic, Nora Alcott stood motionless, gloved hands open, as if holding a secret. Nestled in her palm was a tiny creature, too small, too fragile. A newborn bobcat, pale-skinned, almost translucent, eyes still closed, not making a sound, weighing 61 grams, half a loaf of bread, lighter than a spoon. She placed it on the digital scale. A soft beep sounded. The number appeared, and the room fell into a strange silence. Not because there was nothing to say, but because no one dared to speak. Luna, the creature's mother, had just given birth to 5 other kittens, all healthy, plump. But this one, appearing last, felt like something outside the will of nature. A bobcat, yes, but too small, too weak. "She won't make it," someone whispered. Maybe it was Elliot, the young vet technician holding the notebook, or maybe it was the voice inside Nora's head. And yet, the little one moved. Not much, just a faint twitch of a leg, thin as a thread. Then a breath, as light as dust, but real. Nora stared at her for a long time. In that moment, she was no longer a veterinarian with nearly 20 years of experience. She was just a woman standing at the threshold of life and death, and a tiny being speaking to her in a wordless language. "I want to stay." She named her Hope. Not because she would live, but because she wanted to live. No one left that room for 2 full days and nights. The room was just a small clinic inside the Ash Grove Wildlife Reserve. A few shelves of medicine, a metal table, some old machines patched together over generations of vets. No air conditioning, no specialized neonatal equipment. But from the morning Hope was born, that place became another world, a world where time collapsed, where everything was counted in breaths. Elliot, the young technician, was the first to rush to the old equipment room. He said nothing, just dug frantically through boxes labeled unusable, for mice, too small to test. He found a tiny feeding tube, originally for newborn field mice, and a mini heating pad. When he returned, Nora was still standing there, staring at Hope, unblinking. In her palm was a whole universe flickering between light and dark. They placed Hope in a clear plastic box lined with soft towels, surrounded by heating packs and sensors taped with regular band-aids. It looked like a child's toy, if not for the way everyone around was watching Hope as if their own lives were somehow bound to hers. Mr. Ivor Blake, the retired researcher who had come to Ash Grove just to rest in his twilight years, as he often joked, appeared in the doorway at dusk. He asked no questions, just nodded, sat down beside Nora, and quietly recorded each of Hope's breaths. "She has a heart," he whispered. "Small, but it beats." The first night passed in heavy silence. No one slept. Every 15 minutes, someone checked the incubator's temperature, adjusted the milk drip, and listened for the faint heartbeats through the monitor. Luna, Hope's mother, was in the next room, pacing constantly in front of the door. Her ears perked, soft calls slipped through the cracks. Nora heard them and wrote in her journal, "A mother knows, no matter how many walls we build." By the next morning, Hope was still alive. Eyes unopened, motionless, but occasionally, that tiny belly would rise, then fall. Steady, persistent. When Elliot brought the small milk dropper to her mouth, at first she didn't respond, but by the 3rd time, there was a faint flicker of movement from her tongue. A bit of milk was swallowed. "Oh my God," Elliot whispered. Then he wiped his tears, never letting go of the feeding tube. But the second night arrived, bringing the first and nearly final trial. The heart monitor sounded. The alarm rang out like a death knell. Hope, the fragile little spark, had stopped breathing. Everyone froze. Elliot dropped the milk tube. Ivor stood up, trembling, but Nora didn't. She grabbed a special syringe, a micro-injector with a needle thin as a strand of hair, filled with a custom cardiac resuscitation blend. She bent down, placed her hand on Hope's chest, a spot so small you couldn't tell bone from skin. The needle pierced. 1, 2, 3. 40 seconds passed like a lifetime. No one spoke. No one breathed. Then, a beep and another. The heartbeat returned. Weak, but real. Nora collapsed to the floor. Her hands trembled. Her eyes were red. She cried for the first time in 20 years of veterinary medicine. Not from exhaustion, but because the little being had chosen to stay. The third dawn rose like a blessing. Hope was still alive. For the first time, she turned her head toward the sound of her mother calling through the door. No one dared to believe it, but they all saw it. A creature no bigger than a teaspoon had chosen not to give up. There are things in life so small, yet when they happen, you know you'll remember them forever. For Nora, it was the moment Hope first turned toward the sound of her mother's voice. Not quickly, not clearly. Just a faint tilt, a weak shift of a neck as fragile as a matchstick, but enough to crack every heart in the room. Luna still called out every morning, every night. That sound, soft as wind, carried a sorrow so deep that if you listened closely, you'd feel like you were standing in a vast, lonely forest where someone had lost what they loved. Hope began responding to sounds. A light knock on the glass, rain tapping on the tin roof, and especially Luna's lullaby, a sound rarely used by bobcats, almost only for the weakest or the ones fading away. But Hope heard and answered. A faint mewl like wind through grass, almost inaudible, but Nora heard it. She stopped writing, picked up her pencil, and recorded. For the first time, she spoke back to her mother. That afternoon, as the light dimmed and the sky turned silvery gray, Elliot turned on the room's soft lights. He sat beside the incubator, holding a small cloth scented with Luna's scent. He gently laid the cloth next to Hope, whispering not to anyone but the tiny creature herself. "This is your mama's scent, little one. Today you called her. You did great." Hope didn't respond, of course, but the way she slowly turned her body, paused at the edge of the cloth, then nuzzled into it as if the entire universe had condensed into a memory that never existed, made Elliot wipe his eyes. He had seen complex surgeries, premature births, and heartbreaking rescues, but he had never seen anything so delicate, yet so determined to live. On the 6th day, Hope opened her eyes for the first time. Not round, not bright, just 2 cloudy slits like early morning mist. But they were real. Nora sat frozen. Ivor set down his pen. Elliot stood like a statue. Those eyes didn't look at anyone. They looked at the world, uncertain, weak, yet full of gentleness. Perhaps Hope couldn't see clearly yet. But somehow, she seemed to know she was being seen. Those eyes, Ivor later said, were the closest thing to a miracle I've ever witnessed. And then, something else began to happen. A cloth bearing Hope's scent was placed in Luna's den with her other kittens. Each time Luna smelled it, she would lick it carefully, as if bathing Hope with memory. Then she'd place it among her litter, never letting it fall out of line. She was teaching her other kittens. This little one is still part of this family. Nora saw it all. She sat alone in the monitoring room and wrote in her notebook, "Science never taught me this, but a mother knows." From all over, the first letters began to arrive at Ashgrove. A mother who had a premature birth sent a photo of her baby, born at only 800 grams, along with a note, "We understand, and we are watching Hope every hour." A 7-year-old child from Kansas sent a scribbled drawing of a tiny cat standing on a tall mountain with the caption, "Hope is tiny, but braver than a superhero." The room that once held only the sound of ventilators and the scent of disinfectant began to carry the scent of new paper, colored wax, and the whispers of belief. On the 11th day, Hope suckled a few drops of milk from the feeding tube for the first time. Elliot nearly cried, not because of the amount of milk, but because, in Hope's eyes, he saw something he never thought he'd witness in an underdeveloped animal less than 2 weeks old. She's fighting, not out of instinct, but by choice. At the end of the second week, Nora pinned a piece of paper to the board above Hope's bed. Her handwriting trembled slightly, but it was clear, firm. "No more notes, won't survive. From now on, just one word, Hope." On the 16th day, the sky over Ashgrove turned gloomy as if the forest itself were holding its breath. That morning, Nora didn't go into Hope's room as usual. She stood on the porch, holding a cup of cold tea, staring through the thin mist blanketing the damp grass. Inside her, something was very still. Not worry, not exactly hope, but a kind of waiting. A primal instinct, like how trees wait for rain. The night before, Hope had slept more deeply than ever. Her heart rate was stable. Her stomach digested the carefully measured drips of milk. And most importantly, in her sleep, she had tucked her head into the cloth that smelled like Luna, as if that was home. Nora knew. The time had come. An emergency meeting was called. Elliot, Ivor, the behavioral team, and 2 coordinators from the Wildlife Rescue Center sat around the old wooden table. Beside them were the quarantine zone map, biorhythm charts, and the list of risks no one wanted to mention. But Ivor, who had never made long speeches, said only one sentence. "There are bonds no technology can replace, and I believe it's time for 2 hearts to meet." That afternoon, everything was prepared as though for open-heart surgery. Luna was brought into a quiet, soundproofed room with wooden floors, the scent of dry grass, and warm, golden light like firelight. 2 of Hope's 5 siblings, the gentlest, were chosen to accompany their mother, to ease stress and evoke a sense of safety. Hope was brought in last, still in a ventilated incubator, still wired with sensors, but no longer completely isolated. A thin layer of frosted glass, almost transparent, was the only barrier between her and the outside world. When Luna entered, everything became silent. Not the kind of silence from a lack of noise, but the kind of silence that makes people afraid to breathe in fear of shattering something fragile. Luna didn't growl, didn't react as she had during previous isolations. She stood still. Her ears drooped slightly. Then, slowly, with a gait as gentle as wind brushing leaves, she walked toward the incubator. Nora clenched her hands. Elliot gripped his sleeve. Ivor swallowed hard. No one spoke. No one moved. Luna placed her nose against the glass. A soft sound came from her throat. Not quite a growl, not quite a call. Hope, still lying still, didn't respond for a few seconds. Then, a movement. Gentle. Her tiny head turned toward her mother, and a sound, like mist, rose from a throat that had never known strength. The cry had no clear tone, no defined meaning. But everyone in the room knew. It was an answer. In that moment, no one dared lift a camera. No one recorded. There were only beings. mother and child, life, and the will to live. Luna pressed her nose closer to the glass. Her gaze softened, no longer wild, no longer fearful, only filled with something unnamed, something that made the whole universe stand still. Hope did not take her eyes off her mother. Her cloudy green eyes couldn't see clearly yet, but they were seeing with a sense that no scientific textbook could explain. 10 minutes. They were together. No touching, but connected. No embracing, but closer than any embrace. After 10 minutes, Hope was returned to the special care room. Luna didn't react. She lay down, curling around her two larger cubs as if she knew her smallest one would return, and indeed, after that reunion, everything changed. Hope suckled better. Her heartbeat grew stronger, and that night, for the first time, she let out a faint moan in her sleep, the first sound of a dream. Nora sat at the monitoring desk, turned on the bedside lamp, opened her hard-covered notebook, and flipped to a new page. No report, no recorded metrics. Just one sentence. 2 hearts touched today, and I think maybe the whole world just relearned how to love. The story of hope, born as an impossibility, surviving as a whisper of a miracle, did not remain inside the walls of Ash Grove as long as people thought. It escaped the glass chambers, passed through the fourth lines, and soared away. On trembling hands that wrote in simple words, I saw, I cried, and I believe again. The first to share Hope's story was a nurse on the night shift at the Children's Hospital across the mountains. She happened upon a news brief in the science section of a little-known website. That day, a newborn weighing 780 grams was admitted, showing no suckling reflex and skin turning blue. The shift lasted 10 hours. The baby's mother cried. The doctors were tense. And the nurse? She played the video of Hope snuggling into her mother's clothes. She did nothing else. Just let the video run without sound, placing it beside the IV machine. No one knew why, but a few hours later, the baby opened her eyes and nursed. When she told the story in her nursing group, some said it was just a coincidence, but everyone asked her to send the link. 3 days later, a 47-second video showing Hope opening her eyes for the first time was uploaded online. No clickbait title, no narration. Just a bobcat smaller than a human hand, her eyes still cloudy, looking toward the light. And the final caption on the video, she chose to stay. 47 seconds. 20 million views in 2 days. Letters began arriving at Ash Grove like wind from all directions. An 83-year-old woman in Sweden, hospitalized after a chemotherapy round, wrote in shaky handwriting. I had decided not to continue. But Hope looked, and I thought, maybe I should look a little longer too. An inmate serving time in Arizona sent a charcoal drawing of Hope on a piece of toilet paper with a message, I don't know what's left out there, but if a creature smaller than a lighter can keep living, maybe I should try to change too. The rescue team at Ash Grove now had to rotate shifts not just to care for Hope, but to read letters. Every colored paper scrap, every messy drawing, every sticky note with short lines. My daughter was born premature, 690 grams. I read Hope's story to her every night. We named the kitten we just adopted Hope. I had postpartum depression, but Hope made me believe I can still be a mother. On the 23rd day, a second-grade girl from Idaho sent a small box. Inside were 32 children's picture books and a letter written in pencil. I know Hope can't read yet, but I think if people read to her, she'll know the world is beautiful. I want her to live so she can hear more happy stories. From that day on, volunteers began reading to Hope every night, soft human voices, gentle lights, Hope would often burrow into her mother's clothes, her tail softly twitching. No one knew what she understood. All they knew was she never missed a single story time at night. A Swiss manufacturer of neonatal medical equipment sent Ashgrove a special incubator, a scaled-down version designed specifically for weak newborn wildlife, named the Hope Model. Not for commercial purposes, not for marketing, but simply because, as their chief technical officer wrote, "When I saw Hope, I remembered my daughter in 2002. She was that small too, and she chose to stay." And then the inevitable happened. Hope stood up. Not in the way kittens usually do, quick and steady, but in a way that made the whole world hold its breath. Every step trembled, her legs shook, her tail was stiff, her eyes are wide open, as if the earth beneath her might not be strong enough to hold her. But she stood, and she looked straight ahead. That video spread faster than any storm. A person battling terminal cancer wrote, "Each time I undergo chemo, I play that video, and I tell myself, if Hope can stand up, so can I." A couple who suffered a miscarriage last year after watching the video decided to adopt a premature, abandoned baby girl. "We named her Hope," they wrote, "because she came to us from the same place." From a small vet station in the Ashgrove forest, Hope, a creature not even the size of a palm, had touched millions of hearts. Not with a roar, not with extraordinary feats, but with the persistence to stay in this world, to stay with her mother, to stay with those who refused to let go. No one could say exactly when Hope truly began to belong again. There was no bell that rang, no sign declaring fully recovered. Just small changes. Like more sunlight in the care room, the way Hope slept more soundly each night, the way Luna looked whenever she was allowed to approach just a little closer. And then the first gesture from one of her Bobcat brothers. He leaned against Hope, then lay still. No swipes, no flinching, no pulling away. Just lying there, as if to say, "You're smaller, but you're still one of us." On her first day in the semi-open enclosure, filled with the scent of grass, earth, and her siblings accustomed to romping around, Hope didn't play. She curled up, eyes blinking constantly, ears twitching up and down like a device trying to interpret strange signals. But just 15 minutes later, one of the older brothers, the largest male, once considered aggressive, quietly approached. He didn't bump her, didn't pounce like before. He just placed a front paw beside Hope, sat down, then gently nuzzled her shoulder. In the observation room, Elliot nearly held his breath. "Did he just cuddle her?" Elliot asked, as if doubting his own eyes. Ivor, who had studied hundreds of wild animal behaviors, just nodded silently. "Not in the textbooks," he said, "but very family." From that day on, their meetings gradually extended. From 15 minutes to an hour, then 3 hours, then entire afternoons under gentle sunlight, amid bushes trimmed carefully to avoid harm. Hope played with her siblings. She didn't run, didn't roughhouse, but she wasn't excluded. The other Bobcats, typically highly competitive, began to adapt in strange ways. They didn't fight for food when Hope was nearby. They didn't play tug-of-war or chase games at high speed if Hope was present. And most notably, if Hope backed away or seemed afraid, there was always one who waited. Just stood there. No calling, no urging, just waited. Nora wrote this in the behavioral journal. "This is no longer instinct. This is a form of emotional intelligence, a family learning to adjust for a weaker member." Luna, the mother of all 6 wild cubs, also gradually resumed a role no one expected. She didn't force Hope to feed, didn't drag her closer. Instead, she would sit at a short distance, calmly watching Hope play. And only when Hope was tired, her breath quickening, she would approach, not licking excessively, not smothering, just nudging her gently with her nose into her chest, curling herself around her like a living blanket. Under the soft orange glow of dusk, that image was captured by a camera. Mother and child, saying nothing, simply lying together. No explanation needed, no understanding required. Just presence. On day 39, Hope pounced at a toy for the first time, a soft, straw-stuffed shadow figure. She missed, but she pounced. On day 42, for the first time, she pushed a bigger brother off a sleeping mat, rolled herself onto it, and received no backlash. Just a light glance from the brother, as if smiling. That night, Nora wrote, "I'm not sure if I'm watching a pack of bobcats or a family that knows how to love. All I know is, no one sees Hope as the survivor anymore. They see her as the youngest sibling. And somehow, even her mother seems to smile inside now." By the end of the 6th week, Hope stayed with the group nearly all day. She only returned to the special room at night for supplemental nutrition. She was still smaller, still weaker, but no longer separate, and that, something no one ever taught, was what made the world fall silent. Because in the wild, where survival is the harshest law, a pack of bobcats had learned to slow down, to hold back, and to open wide, just for a little one who was never promised anything. Hope entered her 2nd month as if stepping through a fragile doorway between survival and something even fuller. Her weight had nearly doubled since birth, a modest achievement compared to her siblings. But no one compares anymore. No one called her the weak one. On the note by her bedside, the old label "Special Monitoring" was now covered by a handwritten slip, "Hope, small creature, big heart." Hope's story had traveled farther than any bird ever flown from Ashgrove. The state government launched an elementary education campaign called Be Like Hope, teaching children about perseverance, caregiving, and accepting fragility. In Chicago, a children's hospital redesigned its neonatal ward based on Ashgrove's model. They named it the Hope Room, a space blending modern medicine with the unspoken presence of love. On the ceiling, a mural was painted of Hope curled next to her mother, light filtering down, soft as a lullaby. An international premature birth organization in East Africa sent a letter, "We learned from Hope. We don't have enough machines, but we have hands. We don't have enough medicine, but we have time and patience. And in the past 3 months, we've saved 200 premature infants." At Ashgrove, they installed a small wooden sign along the trail near the Bobcat enclosure. No paint, no scientific name, just one line, carved deeply into the wood. "Not all who are born small will live small." Hope is now a petite bobcat with upright ears like illustrations, eyes clear as morning. She's still not as fast as her siblings, but she climbs trees. She stalks fake prey. She hides dry leaves under her belly and lies atop them like a warrior. She plays. She falls. Then plays again. Elliot often sneaks out to the fence, sketching Hope with a pencil in his notebook. He's not an artist, but every line quivers as though his hand is holding something more delicate than wind and must not let it slip away. One day, a group of middle school students from a nearby town were allowed to visit Ashgrove. A brown-haired girl, her arm still bandaged after a long treatment, stood quietly by the fence for a long time. Hope, lounging lazily under the sun, paid no attention to the world. But somehow, after a few minutes, she stood up, walked over, not too close, but close enough for their eyes to meet through the mesh. The girl didn't say anything. She just cried, then smiled and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." That night, Nora didn't write in her journal. She simply poured a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched Hope playing from afar. The breeze was gentle. Moonlight flickered through the old leaves. Hope leapt onto a rock, spread her front legs as if to embrace the sky, like a creature no longer carrying the weight of fragility, but only the light of a miracle once held in the palm of someone's hand. That morning, the forest was so quiet it felt as if it had made space for something sacred. That day marked exactly 1 year since Hope first lay in Nora's palm. Smaller than a leaf, lighter than a prayer. Ash Grove was no longer the same. The old vet station had become the Hope Center for wildlife, where the most fragile beings were welcomed with both science and belief. Yet among all the upgrades, the modern devices, the polished signs, and the advanced equipment, there remained an old wooden window where Nora still stood every morning, sipping tea. And there, on that day, she stood once more, holding a porcelain cup with a small chip repaired by clear glue, something she never wanted replaced. Hope now weighed over 5 kilograms, a milestone. Still smaller than the average bobcat her age, but no one noticed anymore. Because now, when she leaps from rock to ground, her paws landing light as falling leaves, all anyone sees is a creature born from the impossible and living fully. At the anniversary ceremony, they replayed the earliest footage. Hope yawned as a newborn. Hope opens her eyes for the first time. Hope snuggling into her mother's clothes. Hope wobbling upright. Hope nestled in Elliot's arms. Hope is sleeping amid children's books. No one said a word. Only the sound of sniffles drifted through the crowd, blending with the wind. When a reporter asked Nora how she felt on this special day, she simply smiled. Not the smile of someone who had triumphed, but the smile of someone who had once been afraid, and then saw the light. She said, "When Hope was born, every number said she wouldn't survive. But I think life isn't written in data, it's written in love. Hope isn't a miracle. Hope is proof that miracles happen when we don't give up." Elliot, now the head of neonatal wildlife care, stood away from the crowd, still holding his old sketchbook. He didn't give a speech. He just turned back a page to the first sketch he ever drew of Hope, when she still lay in the incubator, eyes unopened, her back curled like a comma. The page had yellowed with time, but Hope, in real life, climbing a low tree, stretching toward the sun, shone brighter than any line ever drawn. Ivor Blake had officially retired that year, but before leaving, he left behind a file on his desk, the cover handwritten. From Instinct to Compassion, Unrecorded Behaviors of the Bobcat. The first page held only one line. Sometimes science comes after love. Jessica, the animal behaviorist, released a book titled The Language of Luna. There, she documented the silent interactions between mother and cub. The times Luna licked the cloth scented with hope. The times she stepped back to let her explore alone, then stepped into comfort when she fell. Not everyone would call that a language. But those who have loved so deeply they couldn't speak it aloud, they would understand. At the end of the day, a small group quietly gathered in a back room of the center. They called themselves Friends of Hope. Some had survived trauma. Some had lost children. Some were cancer patients in recovery. They met every week, not to talk about hope, but to listen to each other, to remind themselves that everyone has once been small, once been fragile, once stood on the edge of something breaking, but still chose to stay. In the late afternoon, sunlight slanted through the forest leaves. Hope lay on a high rock, ears perked, back straight, eyes gazing into the distance. From afar, Luna approached, quietly lying down beside her. None of them knew that millions were watching. None of them needed to. To Hope, this was simply another day to live, another day to breathe, to run, to hear her mother call her name through the wind. But to the world, it was a reminder that miracles are not always something extraordinary. A miracle is when we continue. It's when we love, even without knowing if it will be returned, It's when we stay, even when everything tells us to let go. Hope chose to stay. And because of that, the world learned how to stay with one another just a little longer. And you, reading this all the way to the end, might be struggling with something of your own. But if a creature weighing just 62 grams once made the whole world stop, then maybe you're carrying something the world needs too. Don't leave just yet. Stay a little longer. You might just be someone's hope out there.